What's going on, everybody? Aiden from Birds vs. Boys here, coming to you on what is most likely the worst night in Philadelphia sports history. I know that this is a football podcast, so I will try to keep it as on detailed focus on the Eagles as possible, but it would be hard to be here without acknowledging the devastating Phillies loss that we just experienced and to end the season and likely end the era of Phillies baseball. I'll try to eulogize them up front again so we can focus on the Eagles. I know most people who are here for the football team, so we'll try to keep it that way. But I certainly think how that season just ended set the tone for the rest of the night. Whereas if you are a Philly 4-for-4 person, I think your energy level for the Eagles after that devastating loss matched actually the level of defensive effort you saw from the Eagles in the second half. Thank you, everybody who subscribed. I think I am very appreciative of how much we've grown recently, and I think you're going to hear a lot less screaming from me. Although, admittedly, watching the Eagles in the second half and some of the effort overall, I didn't think there was anything that they could do to get me seething mad because I feel like my soul was ripped out of my body by the Phillies tonight. But the Eagles did get me there to scream at my TV after I felt like I had nothing left. So I do appreciate that from them. On the Phillies, Orion Kerkering throws the ball away to give up the winning run for the Dodgers in the bottom of the 11th. The season is over. I'll just think about that play for the rest of my life because he had all the time in the world to just turn and throw it to first with two outs and just panicked. He just panicked. And I know that it is not totally his fault, and it is an offense that scored only one run, and you're going to hear the same talking points that we've had about the Phillies for the past 4 years. Now, in the grand scheme of things, this is probably, unfortunately, the last time that you are going to have those talking points because I think this is the end of that Phillies era, and I think they're going to blow it up quite a bit. You can't just keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, and I think a lot of fan favorites are on their way out the door, which is really sad, man. Like, it is sad. I know that in October they've had these shortcomings, but to me it is very sad because it is a baseball team that reinvigorated the sport in this city after a decade plus of it being really a barren wasteland. And for a long time, people considered Philadelphia to be a baseball town more so than a football town. And we just had this huge gap where we had one of the best runs of baseball we've ever experienced here, including a World Series. And we just had this entire gap until Bryce Harper showed up and they really turned this team around, took us on a magic carpet ride in 2022 of all time, one of the all-time, any baseball fan, regardless of team, would have signed up for that run that they took us on in 2022. And from there, they just catapulted themselves to these consistent 90-plus win, fun teams to watch during the summer, experience where it was like your favorite TV show was on every night when the Phillies were on. And I think all they'll be remembered for, though, is these October shortcomings. And it is the exclamation point in this Dodgers series with a sacrifice bunt to give yourself up playing for the tie at home to go down 2-0. And then the absolute just final death by a million cuts, throwing the ball to the backstop in a panic play to allow the Dodgers to score there. And I feel like I walked away from that series the same way that I walked in, thinking that the Dodgers and the Phillies are the two best teams in baseball, but there's really nothing that's offered for a silver medal, and they were just marginally not as good as the Dodgers. The in-between stuff. The Dodgers made one more defensive play, like the wheel play on the sacrifice bunt. They made one less mental mistake, like not throwing the ball to the backstop with two outs in the bottom of the 11th. It was just little tiny things that made the difference in this series. And again, we'll talk about the offense till the cows come home, and these guys are on year 11 and 13 of their contracts, but they did not get enough from Trey Turner, from Kyle Schwarber, from Bryce Harper. But if you look on the opposite side of that, they held Shohei Ohtani to 1 hit in the series. He ended up with 8 strikeouts. He had no extra base hits. They completely took him out of the game on offense. So it wasn't like the Dodgers star showed up as well. It's just that they played a little bit better winning baseball. And I feel like that is going to be, unfortunately, the memory of the Phillies. Is they were like slightly, it was just a little something off, right? They were down 1 bat, they were down 1 bullpen arm. How many times did it feel like over the course of these years they didn't have a bridge to the 9th inning, or they just fell 1 arm short in a playoff series? You go back to the 2023 NLCS against the Dodgers or against the Diamondbacks, with trying to just, you felt it from July on that Craig Kimbrell was not going to be able to hold. You didn't think that they had enough firepower at the bottom of their lineup with Johan Rojas. All of those things came back to hurt them in 2023. It did not really get better from there. So you had those guys at the top who, when they struggled, nothing else would get going, and they'd have these playoff droughts with the main money guys. But this year, there were playoff droughts from the main money guys on the other side of the field in the Dodgers, who are the money guys with the highest bankroll you will ever see in baseball, with the same issues, not having enough firepower at the top. But this one hurt the most because at full strength with Wheeler and with Bader in the lineup, you would have felt a lot better. It felt like the loss of Bader on both defense and offense really killed this team, because even though he had 1 at bat tonight and it was a 10-pitch at bat and he was out and he struck out, you could see the battle that he had, whereas they were walking Bohm intentionally to get to Brandon Marsh, who was having uncompetitive at bats in your 5-hole, which just can't happen. He became like a stopgap in the middle of the lineup. And I think if Bader's there, you can really tweak that lineup and it becomes a lot deeper, whereas you can kind of shapeshift that around. Brandon Marsh had been really good down the stretch in that 5-hole, but this is the case where, one, he's in left field and he's a better left fielder than he is center fielder. That means you have a better center fielder in. That means you have Max Kepler playing in right field. So you have a better overall offensive or defensive outfield, then you have a better overall offensive outfield. It becomes a deeper lineup, and you don't run into those stop gaps right in the middle because you have guys like Bader there. You don't have Castellanos in the lineup, who ironically was the only one who delivered one of the extra base hits here tonight. But yeah, I think these would be the same talking points that the main money guys didn't deliver. They were a bullpen arm short, and that they had another playoff shortcoming, and they didn't get the job done. And Kyle Schwarber said it after the game, and I felt it too. He was like, I really felt like in my heart of hearts, this was going to be the team to get it done. And I truly felt that too. I felt it going into October. I said, if they make it through the Dodgers, the road ironically gets easier. And I left this thinking the same thing I did, is I think they were the second best team in baseball. But what good is that if you are constantly second or third best? That means you have to shake things up and try something new, which sucks because, again, this was a very likable baseball team for the course of 4 years, and having lost again in the fashion that they did and without the offensive output to require some of these guys to be back, I think it's a full shape shift of that lineup in every way that they can, which sucks. So we're almost at 8-9 minutes of talking about the Phillies. Again, I do apologize for that if you're here strictly for football, but I thought that set the tone for the night because the energy level for the Eagles was pretty clear. I was pretty locked in on the Phillies, so I wasn't really totally locked in on the first half. I know what happened. I went back and saw some of it. I think I could report on the second half alone, and it'd be fine. I don't think anybody felt any differently than me. I'm going to break up 2 things with the Eagles and why they lost and why you're concerned. One is a talking point that we've talked about since the offseason and since free agency, where the 2024 Eagles team wasn't just talented. They were a very deep team. So if any issues ever arose, they were able to plug those holes. If Quinyon Mitchell had a stinger in a playoff game, they could bring Isaiah Rodgers in. And Isaiah Rodgers would be opposite of Darius Slay. So if Slay had to go out and they'd have Isaiah Rodgers and Quinyon Mitchell in the game and Cooper DeJean in the slot, right? If Jalen Carter had a heel injury last year, Milton Williams could step in and fill that role. Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt didn't have to play the amount of reps that they're playing now because Josh Sweat was playing alongside them. Now, without Josh Sweat on the team and Nolan Smith out, you start to figure out, hey, where am I going to get edge rusher snaps from? If Landon Dickerson's out of the game, that means Brett Toth is in. And if Brett Toth is in, then you worry about your offensive line holding up. There was a lot less depth this year. And a lot of guys had to not only take a step talent-wise, had to take a step rep-wise, and there weren't the next wave of reinforcements like we experienced a year ago. And think about how many times they had to go to those reinforcements last year. They don't have that this year. So when you're playing on a short week on the road, you see that rear its ugly head. Quinyon Mitchell leaves with a hamstring injury. So you are now left with Kaylee Ringo and Adoree Jackson as your corners. It went exactly how you thought it would go. Jalen Carter, before we even play the game, is out with a heel. Again, last year, you feel all right because Milton Williams is going to be in the middle there. You got Jordan Davis next to him. You feel like that's a pretty good starting level combo there in the NFL. Now, you don't have Jalen Carter there. And you really just didn't get much from that unit. They were just not getting pressure. Nolan Smith is on IR. Where are you getting snaps from edge rushers, right? One of the best ones today was from Ty Robinson, making his first appearance as a rookie who's really a defensive tackle. All of those reinforcements that you had a year ago, you are now witnessing the issue with the lack of depth that this team now has compared to where it was a year ago. I think a short week on the road on the MetLife turf is where you see those type of things pop up most. And I don't think that is fixable within this year. They're not going to magically fill out this roster with more talent behind these guys. Like they had their chance at Isaiah Rodgers. They didn't take it. That's fine. But there is no Isaiah Rodgers who can fill in for you. In these cases, it is now Adoree Jackson. It is now Kaylee Ringo. You are seeing the negative effects of that. So that is the one thing that stuck out to me is you looked out there in the second half and you started to say to yourself, the Eagles are a very strong brand name at this point. But you look out there, the talent on the field was not matching the brand name that you have come to expect from this team. That looked more like preseason Eagles football, where you're trying to get reps for young guys and you're trying to get reps for people who are on the fringe of making the team. That's what you saw from that defense over the course of this game as guys went in and out of the lineup, and you lost two very important guys in Jalen Carter and Quinyon Mitchell. Now, I told you there were two things. That was the main one because I think it's a negative that's going to keep rearing its ugly head. Number two, the energy with this team is fucking disgusting. Like them coming out in the second half and just looking absolutely lifeless yet again on offense is driving me up a wall. And it carried over the defense. You would think for guys who are getting limited reps, you'd be going all out. Nope. It was infuriating. Again, I didn't think I could get seething mad at these dickheads after the Phillies season just ended. This Phillies team that I've loved so much for 4 years, and all I wanted to do was just sulk for a second and think about how many good times I had with this baseball team. But I can't because Jackson Dart takes off on the run and Jihad Campbell is shying away from contact with Jackson fucking Dart. Do you have any pride? And it gets worse because that was a third down. The Giants convert. They get down to the goal line. The tackle attempt by Adoree Jackson on Cam Scatabo at the goal line was one of the more pathetic fucking things I have ever seen on a football field. I think you hear this all the time. Pro athletes are different than us, right? We're just casual guys who work 9 to 5. I'm hosting a podcast right now. If I had to do the Oklahoma drill with Adoree Jackson, it's not one of those situations where I think I'd steamroll him. I think he would Olay me. I think he's that scared of tackling. His lack of effort in tackling drives me up a wall. And I think that there is now people who were not here last year. They come from loser teams and they reek of loser energy. You saw that with Adoree Jackson tonight. He was horrible in coverage. Kaylee Ringo was also just disgustingly bad. It's been the worst it was since the Byron Maxwell years in 2013, 2014 with Kerry Williams. That is over a decade. The coverage has not been that bad. But Adoree Jackson, this has happened multiple times now this year where he's not willing to try to tackle. If you're not willing to try to tackle on defense, why are you on the field? And I get it that they really have no other options because Quinyon Mitchell went out injured and Jacorian Bennett ended up on IR. But still, have some fucking pride. That was awful. And it was just like you could tell the energy level between those teams was so different. The Giants were so clearly engaged, rallying around these two rookies, Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo. And the Eagles just look lethargic. They run a lethargic offense. They run a predictable offense. It doesn't get the defense on its heels. But the defense, like them not being able to contain Jackson Dart, which is the one thing that you had to do, and then giving no tackling effort is crazy to me. It is so insane. And again, back to the point, Adoree Jackson comes from the Giants. He's a loser. He comes in and does loser shit. Tank Bigsby, they trade from him from Jacksonville, who admittedly are good this year, but that is because they had a full overhaul because they were tired of being losers. They trade for Tank Bigsby. They get rid of him. They say, see ya, this is a new era. We want winners. You are a fucking loser. He comes in. How is it that in the year of 2025, we can't get one dumbass to get back there and field a kick correctly? This is one of the more insane, like, subplot points of the Eagles season, that they are constantly starting at the 10 or 15 yard line because they can't get kick returners to field the ball. Do you know how insane that sounds? That is something, it's like, it's not even a coaching level thing. We've all been playing jackpot since we were 8 years old when the ball goes up in the air and we go and field it. How have they not been able to get these guys who can catch the ball and return it in a time in football where you pretty much need like 15 to 20 yards to get into field goal range based on how talented these kickers have gotten? The Eagles are going backwards. They are not starting at the 30, which is almost a given in this day and age. And last year was a 25. Now they've actually amplified it. Now that you're usually starting at the 20, at the 30 or the 35, and the Eagles are starting all of their drives at the 15. It happened in the Rams game 3 different times. It happened again today. Nick Sirianni exploded on Tank Bigsby, who is, again, you let loser energy into the building and you're getting loser results. And then put A.J. Dillon back there, and he drops it at the 5-yard line. They had 4 drives in the second half that started within their own 15. You're making everything harder for yourself because then this predictable, lethargic offense that has to start at the 15, instead of having to go 15, 20 yards to get into field goal range, now has to go 30, 40 yards to get into field goal range. And when they don't, because they telegraph every single thing that they do, despite having some of the most talent that other fan bases would pray to the gods for, they punt and you put the defense on its heels and give the other team good field position. They lose the field position battle every single week. And you know why that's so annoying? Because for 6 months after they won this Super Bowl, these guys all hammered home the same point to us watching on our couches. We're going to be tough, detailed together. Which one of those were you tonight? Because you weren't tough. Cam Scatterbo, you didn't want to meet him in the hole. You got run over multiple times. You were afraid of Jackson Dart. You couldn't get your hands on him. You couldn't get pressure. You were getting beat up when I turned the game off by the backup center who was pulverizing this defensive line. So what part of tough were you tonight? Adoree Jackson, not tough at all. Detailed. Okay, let's see. We lost the turnover battle. We had some pretty ugly flags in the second half. We missed a deep ball to Devontae Smith, which would have been a surefire walk-in touchdown. That we had more times where the offense, Jalen Hurts had all the time in the world to throw it and nobody was open, so we didn't scheme that. Together, what part of that are we guys? Because this week we had to sit around in a circle and break out the feeling stick and all talk to each other about our feelings and about how hurt we are, because we used to be best friends and now we aren't anymore. So we won't talk on the sideline together about what we're seeing on the field so that we can improve as an offense, because we're butthurt about our feelings because we used to be best friends, but we're not anymore. By the way, these are two 30-year-old men that are doing this, and another man has to sit them down so they can have a feelings talk. This is not an episode of The Real Housewives of Philadelphia. This is two grown fucking men who are doing this. So which part of tough, detailed, or together have you been in the first 6 weeks, especially culminating tonight against a very bad New York Giants team? Don't let this moment fool you. I like Jackson Dart. Go back to all of our draft conversations. I really, really liked him. I thought the Giants were actually going to pull the trigger on him earlier in the draft. I like him a lot. His comp actually was Jalen Hurts. But this is not a good Giants team. Down Malik Neighbors with really not having that much firepower at the wide receiver position, lost their center midway through the game, and what's really just not a good offensive line that Jackson Dart is in front of. So take away the result and the energy that the crowd was given and the team was given tonight. It's really not a good team. So I'd love to know which of those shine brightest today, the tough part, the detailed part, or the together part. And let's just go through offensive sequence, because yet again, it is an issue. The lack of feel on offense is just killing me. So they are down 27-17 in the second half. I thought at points they did do a good job of adding wrinkles to their offense, having some rhythm to their offense. And again, it's like they get 75% of the way there and then just revert, because I sound like I'm doing the same talking points as I did against the Broncos and I did against the Bucks. They had a really good first half. They moved the ball well. They spread the ball around. They moved with rhythm, not necessarily hurry up, but got to the line quickly. And you saw different wrinkles in their offense. Again tonight, you saw the little shovel play to Dallas Goedert. You had some seam routes to Goedert as well. He had a huge night. The first two plays, nice little pitch plays to Saquon Barkley. He's got 30 yards on his first two carries. You're thinking to yourself, yeah, that's exactly what I've come to expect from this offense over the years. That's exactly what I would like to see. Second half comes, and yet again, for the third straight week, they revert and they can't get anything going. So fast forward, one more thing, and they did this once and never went back to it. They had a play where they put Devontae Smith in motion. He came into the backfield. They did a fake end around, spin, turn, hand it to Saquon. It didn't garner any yards, which might be why they went back to it. But in that situation, they had to make the defense make a play. It just so happens that Kayvon Thibodeau blew up the block, which again is another issue and another issue with depth. They don't have Landon Dickerson like that a year ago. They have Brett Toth. So when this happens and then it's 3rd and 12 and Brett Toth gets beat by Brian Burns, that's because you're not as deep as you were and you don't have your starting guy out there in Landon Dickerson. But in that situation, I was really proud of them because I thought that was a wrinkle in the offense that I hadn't seen before, and it makes the defense think. Yes, Kayvon Thibodeau did crash down on Saquon Barkley, but if you go back to that on tape, you might be able to hit something like that, because the next time you could have handed it to Devontae Smith on an end around. Or that defensive end might start chasing him instead of crashing down on Saquon Barkley the next time. You never know. But they didn't go back to that, of course. Instead, they have a sequence, and I think there's just these sequences at least 3 times a week where you know what's coming and you're still in awe that they were willing to run it. It's a first down play to they are in their predictable formation. They're in their predictable run formation. They hand it to Saquon. He stopped at the line, so now they're behind the sticks, and it's 2nd and long. Instead of running any semblance of play action, there's no motion at the line on the next play. It is yet another run to Saquon Barkley. He loses a yard again. All right, so now you're in 3rd and 12. How are you in 3rd and 12? Like, you just always put yourself in these negative situations. Everybody was knowing that you were running it on 1st down or on 2nd down. By the way, you're down 10 at this point. And there was no like rhythm or like no urgency to this offense. And again, the John Wooden saying, be quick, but don't hurry. you don't always have to be in a hurry up offense, but you could get to the line quicker so that you could scan it, so you could put the onus on the defense so that you can read the defense a little bit quicker to know if they're bringing pressure. Instead, you get to the line so late, it's very predictable in the run pass calls. Dan Orlovsky was talking about this. He's like, you can tell every time pre-snap based on the formation. They're in shotgun every time, and you know based on where Saquon Barkley is standing whether it's going to be a run and pass. And he's a very good NFL analyst. You don't even necessarily have to be. If you just watch the Eagles long enough and sit on your couch, and if you have NFL Sunday Ticket and you sit down yourself and you just say, I'm going to dedicate 3 hours to this slop that is the Eagles offense, I can just figure out when they're going to run and pass. It doesn't take a genius level to figure it out. So what do you think NFL defenses with NFL caliber defensive coordinators are able to do? Key in on all of this talent that you have on offense. That is what's plaguing them. There is no creativity to this. Every time people know exactly what you're doing. Man, oh man, is it bad. And they lost the turnover battle tonight. I can't even really be mad. Like the interception at the end by Hurts. Play before, it looked like it was an illegal contact penalty that they picked up. I don't understand why they picked it up, but I'm not going to harp on the officials this week because of how ugly the Eagles offense was. But that's one of those, you put yourself in the situation then where they know a pass is coming. They pick up the penalty. It's in 2nd and 10 and you're down by 10. You need to score. And they bring all out pressure on the Eagles. He throws it again. Another one. Kerkering called it out. It was like the 3rd or 4th time that Jalen Hurts threw to his left side. Eventually, the defenses can key in on your trends, pick them up, and react quickly to them. So the corner, Flott, recognizes that. The Giants bring pressure because you're in a negative 2nd down situation. He jumps the route and almost pick sixes it, and they're going back the other way. It's every week. I can't do it anymore. There's just no way that Kevin Patullo can be a part of this team anymore. If he has to be the fall guy, if he has to be the Bane, they expect one of us in the wreckage, brother, he's got to be. It's just like, if you want to save your season, that's the way that it's got to be. Because the way it's trending, again, this is not a bad team. This is a very talented team. They lack depth that they had last year. A mini bye here after week 6 before you go on to Minnesota definitely will help you with that situation to kind of get yourself back right. Hopefully Landon Dickerson, Quinyon, Jalen Carter, get all your normal guys back. But at the same time, they're trending so negative in their energy in all 3 things that you've come to expect from them: the tough, the detailed, and together. They are horrible at all of those right now. At some point, there has to be a fall guy for that, and it probably has to be Kevin Patullo. It doesn't really excuse anything that's going on the field execution-wise, but the predictability of the offense is what's really leading to putting a lot of pressure on this talent. And with less talent and less depth than a year ago, these are the situations that you keep running into. They can't fire, an offensive lineman, but they can definitely fire the offensive coordinator. And I think you need to learn from your mistakes. People bring up 2023 all the time. I think that's why I'm so frustrated right now. 2023, we know like the defense was bad. We didn't think that the defense was good going into that year. There were podcast episodes we were doing where we were begging for Darius Leonard to come help this linebacking core. It's a lot different this year. I think it's a more talented team, and they have to get healthy, and they can go on a run there late. If they got Nolan Smith back and got the guys back that they were missing tonight, it starts to look a whole lot different for you. But my God, you do have to learn from the trends that if it looks like a sinking ship on offense, you can't just keep letting the ship sink. Like, it can't be week after week of stagnant offense where you come out in the second half and teams make minor adjustments to you, and then you have 4 punts and an interception. It's just inexcusable. And I just feel like the negative energy around this team is really starting to seep in. But all of that can be fixed by winning. Didn't happen tonight. I'm trying to think of any positives. Ty Robinson had a play. Goddard had a good night. Yeah, that was it. I thought it was the worst game the Eagles have played, ironically, since 2023 at MetLife against the Giants. They looked lifeless. They looked like they didn't care. I hated the lack of toughness the most because, again, you were down a lot of talent, and I don't think they looked the talent gap between the Giants and the Eagles wasn't as great as people thought, especially on defense. But the lack of heart and the lack of effort really killed me because it just felt like the level of engagement between the Giant sideline and the Eagles was so drastic. And I kept calling it out on the broadcast as they were doing just jumping jacks and throwing glitter and parades for Cam Scatabo and Jackson Dart in their third start. I could have done a little bit less of that, to be honest. And that's somebody who really likes Jackson Dart. But it was a tough watch of every ball that went up that Jackson Dart threw. There was something good, whether it was a bad ball or not. But again, lack of game plan, lack of discipline in the first half, 5 rushes for 45 yards. We talked about it on the podcast this week. If there was one thing that a rookie quarterback who's mobile is going to do, it's break out of the pocket to save themselves. That's their break glass in case of emergency. If they couldn't contain him. And how hard that was your one thing. And we thought that might be the one thing that they'd be good at because they have athletic linebackers. But again, it feels like they're blitzing those athletic linebackers because the front four aren't holding. So they're finding other ways to get pressure on the quarterbacks. And when you're blitzing those linebackers, he can kind of escape out of that pocket. There was really nobody. Again, they get no pressure up front. And even when they do, it would just allow Dart to break contain. He made plays with his legs that inspired the team, that got them some yards. They figured things out early, so they got into a rhythm. It allowed him to have some confidence. We talked about last week, the Giants had 5 straight turnover drives. The Eagles were not able to get to that. They were not able to get any pressure on him to force him into bad throws, force fumbles, anything like that. It was a whole lot of nothing burger. One thing about Jackson Dart, and then we'll sign off. But man, brother, you got to get down. There was a play there where I thought he took a stinger to both shoulders. He got checked for a concussion. Brian Dable, why are you yelling at the concussion specialist and the doctor on the sideline? They weren't the ones who wanted to evaluate Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart was lying lifeless on the ground. Dart was the one who needed them. It wasn't like the concussion guys were slowing you down. So I don't know why you're screaming at him. I really hated that out of a coach, for you to be screaming at the medical doctor on the sideline because he didn't get your concussed player back in the game fast enough. Listen, there's only so much they can do when he takes a shot like that and he doesn't get up. But Dart, absolutely, just he's got to get down more because he takes some shots. He really, there were 3 or 4 in the second half alone where I was like, my God. So, in all, worst night of all time. I truly hated it. It's ironic because the Eagles have won a Super Bowl, so I should feel better about them, but I enjoyed the Phillies more. And maybe it's just because of the different systems of play where baseball is 162 games and football is only 16. So you see these guys more. You see them every night, and you see them in a season when there isn't anything else going on. There's no rival sport in summer. It's just baseball. So it's really tough when their season ends because it becomes so much part of your habit and part of your day to day. Like I mentioned, it's like your favorite TV show, and it starts in spring. You fall through March. You fall when the weather gets warm, and then it lasts until the weather gets cold. So it's very much a sport that is always there for you. It's just that it's a sport that rips your heart out in the end most times. It especially rips your heart out when you have a group of guys like this who I think, again, will get labeled as came up short in October. Man, did they fight for it. Man, could you tell that they wanted it. Sometimes that was their downfall, that they wanted it too much. And maybe that was what led to tonight and their final loss and what's probably the final loss of this era. But switching from them and seeing the devastation on their faces on how they lost, the fact that they lost, and then turning it into the Ole Eagles defense of linebackers afraid of Jackson Dart, corners not trying to tackle. It was just a tough pill to swallow. And it was a tough segue. And the Eagles have a mini bye right here. They've got a lot to figure out. I think they have a lot culturally and DNA wise to figure out. Isn't it ironic? I think the Phillies had all of their culture and their DNA figured out. They just needed to execute. The Eagles, on the other hand, I think they got everything to figure out, culture and DNA wise, and that will hopefully lead you to the execution part. But I walk away with this game. When I went into the week, I said, I don't expect this to be a blowout. I don't care how bad the Giants are. It's a short week. It's on the road. You're playing at MetLife. Just get in, get out with no injuries and a win. They, worst case scenario, got more injured and looked so lifeless. It raises somehow even more red flags with the offense that you had before. It was the absolute worst case scenario. So we sign off on what is Black Thursday. This is the all-time low. You didn't think you could feel this way less than a year after a Super Bowl, but man, was this a day that ripped your heart out baseball wise and then punched you in the face while you were down with your football team. The sun will maybe come up here tomorrow in Philadelphia. Who knows? Who knows? End of an era, baseball wise. End of one of the ugliest Eagles losses I've seen since the early 2010s. Wow. What a time. Hey, thanks for subscribing to the happiest podcast known on earth. We'll be back this week. We'll do a recap show of the football that happens on Sunday, or maybe I'll just do 30 minutes more of screaming about the Eagles tackling issues. We'll see. We'll talk to you guys then.